Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Jamie Santiago, President and CEO at New Brunswick Tomorrow, an organization that is moving people forward by improving the quality of life for every New Brunswick resident. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that has driven social revitalization for the city of New Brunswick, New Jersey, by taking on the issues that matter most to city residents and families. Good morning, Jamie. Welcome to Grade.com Talks. We're excited to have you here.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
How would you describe your organization to someone who is not familiar with your work?
Yeah, I think that everyone understands nonprofits or nonprofit work. And so we are a nonprofit. And so at least superficially, I would say that we're a charitable organization. We're a not-for-profit. But the difference is that where a lot of organizations are out to make a profit, we're more out to make a difference. And so our mission is to improve quality of life for everyone that calls New Brunswick, New Jersey home. And one of the things that I like to say is that if it matters to you and it matters to your family, it matters to us. So from a high level, New Brunswick Tomorrow focuses on the issues that impact you. So this means that where you live, the home you live in, the conditions of the neighborhood that you live in, your family's health, their well-being, your child, and how they're doing. Are they in environments that are in supportive, healthy environments that allow them to meet their fullest potential? So for someone who doesn't know who we are, it can seem like we do a lot of work, right? Because we're thinking about all these things. However, think about the decisions that you as a parent or a guardian makes every single day. Well, that's us. But we work at the scale of an entire city. Literally over 60,000 people are in our city. Now, don't get me wrong. We don't make decisions thinking that we know what's best. Actually, our whole model at NBT, at New Brunswick Tomorrow, is focused around partnerships. It's focused around resident-led input and initiatives. But just thinking about that example of parents and their kids, you can see why we have initiatives under different banners: education, employment, food security, access to doctors and healthcare, housing, safety, etc., because it recognizes that people are complicated. And these issues typically don't exist by themselves or in isolation. And so neither should we. So we think about all of those things when we do our work to help this city move forward.
Wonderful. I really like the fact and the wording that you mentioned, that we are here to make a difference. And the analogy that you provided on the family, when the family makes decisions, the parents make decisions for children. However, you are here to make a difference, not for one person, not for two families, but for the whole city. That's wonderful work. Could you please give us more background information of the New Brunswick, the city itself, the history? You mentioned the number of population, but where is it located? What's the culture is like?
New Brunswick, New Jersey is located in central New Jersey, so right in the middle of the state. In fact, they call this city the hub city because we're literally right in between New York City to the north of us, about 45 minutes north, and Philadelphia, which is about 45 minutes, maybe a little more, south of us in Pennsylvania. Those are the two metropolitan areas that kind of sandwich New Jersey, and we are right in the middle. And so as the hub city, we have a history of industry. We have a history in this city of immigrants that have made New Brunswick their home. As far back as our history, MBT goes back 50 years in this city. And when New Brunswick Tomorrow was founded, the population was primarily Hungarian and Czechoslovakian at the time. It has over time shifted. And today we still have those immigrant roots. In fact, you can drive down our main corridor and see those Hungarian influences. But today, the majority of our population are immigrant Hispanics from Mexico. And so you feel the energy this port of entry city with a history that is both kind of based in industrialized communities, but also communities that come together, right? Because immigrant communities tend to come together in ways that maybe suburban communities do not. And so New Brunswick has a rich history, just being a very welcoming city and a city, just like a New York City or Philadelphia, where there's a lot of energy, a lot of activities, and a lot of work that's happening. And so we have 60,000 people that call New Brunswick home, 24/7, 365 days a year. And so our focus is on those people that call New Brunswick home.
Wonderful. The location that you mentioned make it easier to access both New York and New York and Philadelphia, as well as being a hub for trade and industrial things, and welcoming the culture of city, being welcoming. First being welcoming to Hungarian and Czechoslovakian immigrants, now being welcoming to Hispanic Hispanic immigrants. That's wonderful. And at this day and stage, we need more cities that are open to different cultures. And your city is a great example that how can one be diverse and welcoming. That's great. Could you please tell us about some of the most common issues that the residents of New Brunswick face?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, as an immigrant community, all the issues that our community face probably aren't that much different from other immigrant community. So instead, I want to focus a little bit around this last year, because the last year has been focused on COVID-related responses. Mm-hmm. So our community absolutely bore the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Just to share what I mean, in a formal survey that we conducted with over 300 households in the city, what we heard back from families, predominantly immigrant families, was that over 80% of the households either experienced someone losing a job or a reduction in their wages because of the pandemic. We also learned that 79%, so almost 80% of households were worried about the pandemic and how it was going to affect their ability to put food on the table for their families, for themselves and their families. And the last just kind of big thing that stuck in my mind was 83% of our family said that their ability to pay rent was affected by the pandemic. And so if you could think about those three things, people were worried about food, people were worried about paying their rent, and people were losing jobs during COVID. Now, COVID affected everyone, Black, white, Hispanic, everyone. But in communities like New Brunswick, which is a community predominantly of immigrant and people of color, while our medical and public health workers focus on the efforts containing the virus and getting people vaccinated, New Brunswick Tomorrow and others are continually addressing the underlying economic challenges and social challenges that made COVID-19 so devastating and destabilizing for our communities of color. So specifically, our focus across all of our program areas consisted of providing wraparound assistance to families to improve housing stability. That is, we help keep families in their homes through direct cash assistance so that they can pay their rent. In the first round of that assistance, MBT fundraised over $300,000 to help our families that were immediately facing eviction. In the second round, the city of New Brunswick, through the CARES Act funding that came through the federal government, provided another $410,000. And to date, with partners around the city like Catholic Charities, Unity Square, Holy Family Parish, which is a Catholic church here in town, Salvation Army, and PRAB, we were able to allocate, I'm going to guess and say over $1 million in direct assistance to families to help keep families in their homes. We also banded together to provide investments to local businesses. And so as you can imagine, during the pandemic, businesses were shutting down. And so as the businesses shut down, they're left a lot of the economic engine that kept communities afloat. And so we helped just over 40 small businesses across the city receive more than $700,000 from state funding, State CARES Act funding, to keep their employees paid with wages and to keep their establishments open, right? We didn't want the mom and pop organizations to go under because of it. And so we supported in helping businesses access those dollars and keep those doors open. We also focused on mental health. If you could, the pandemic was hard, particularly for students. And so when we think about the pandemic and families losing family members through sickness or to death, even the loss of a job can be stressful. We partnered with our school districts to make sure that there was a social worker, a psychologist, or someone available, a case manager, that our students can access at any time of the day so that we can support their well-being. We also made those same care workers available to families because we know that every student is attached to a parent or to a guardian, right? So we want to support them as well. And so those same workers were our boots on the ground. Just as public health workers were out putting, needles and vaccines in people's arms, we were putting kind of the Band-Aids on some of these really tough situations, traumatic situations for our families. And lastly, COVID, because it affected everyone, it was a public health crisis. And so we supported our health partners, our local hospitals. In fact, we partnered with them and our county health department to assist in their community messaging around, I would say, first prevention, secondly, testing. And now we're working with them to make sure that those vaccines get in the arms of our immigrant families, regardless of insurance, regardless of being able to access a doctor, but because it is the best chance for communities of color to get back to normalcy and to actually get some work done. And so, all these things, and I'm sure I'm missing a few things, but all these things have been our focus as an agency to support family. But all of it is predicated around this idea that if you're going to make a difference, you have to focus on the things that matter to people. And in this last year, if you weren't talking about COVID, if you weren't working around supporting families because of COVID, I would question whether or not you were being relevant in this last year. And as an organization, we both led on these efforts, and we also recruited our friends and our partners to join us to help affect the lives of those that really needed it most.
Yeah, last year, I'm sure everyone felt it, the effects of this pandemic and shelter, rent, food, and employment. Those were some of the most, as you mentioned, the worries of almost every family. And the fact that your organization brought community together and made a fundraising and helped both individuals and families as well as small businesses to survive during this unprecedented times is quite supportive, and it's quite uplifting for the people who were affected. Especially, you mentioned people of color, as your city is mainly presumed of people of color. That's a wonderful work.
Thank you. No, just one word. I because you're right. I want to say that we brought people together, and you're right in saying it. But I also saw, last year, one of the things that we did was we actually delivered food. I was out in the community delivering food with my staff. And I have to mention, my staff is phenomenal. I have 10 people that work here at New Brunswick Tomorrow full time. And they are hardworking individuals. But I remember us, going out last March, delivering meals, and I remember seeing a lady. She must have been 8 or 9 months pregnant, ready to give birth, and she was receiving one of these meals from me. And so I'm in my car looking at the address I need to go to next, and I see this lady take the meal from the meals that I just provided her from her bag, and she shared the meals with her neighbor. And so and she's pregnant. She had every right to just take those meals home and eat them because, hey, she's feeding too. And I just remember seeing that and thinking to myself, everyone had a role last year in helping. Everyone did. And so if there's one thing that I learned in that experience is that as people, we really did come together. And this community, New Brunswick, absolutely big, like what we did, raising all this money to feed people, and small, like what she did to share those meals. In fact, I got out of my car and I gave her 2 more meals. And I said, "Oh, if you're hungry, please take it." And it was the right thing to do. And that's kind of our position is, what's the right thing to do? Let's do it.
That's a beautiful story. I mean, the fact that it shows that humanity still exists and the kindness is in the soul of every person. And the fact that pregnant lady saw that her neighbor needed it more than she, and she provided helping hand, and then the spiral effect worked, and you helped her again. And this chain of kindness, this chain of support is something that this world needs at this moment. And your city being pioneers, your city being role models is a wonderful example for others to follow. How do you see the city of New Brunswick developing in the next 5 to 15 years?
It's interesting because I came to this city 20 years ago, and the city looked very different 20 years ago. And what I would say is that when I first came to the city, it looked like a regular city. I didn't know that the city can improve or grow. But over 20 years, what I see are new buildings being built. What I see are families that are stronger than they were 20 years ago. And I believe that 20 years from now, what we're going to see is more of that. We're going to see, as an organization that has been here for almost 5 decades with continuous improvements around the city, from brick and mortar projects that have transformed this cityscape, to the resurgence of cultural arts, the city has kind of successfully held strong, even through one of the worst economic recessions to take hold of our country, and even through this last year with this pandemic crisis. I believe that in 5 to 10 years, that as an organization, if God gives us the ability to still be here, and I believe he will, that the only measure of a successful city is in how the people are doing. It's not about the city buildings, it's about the people. And I do think that through our leadership and our support and our programs, this vision that we have for our community, that we will continue to build, continue to grow as a city, and our people, our families, as they set roots in the city, will be better because of it. They will meet their fullest potential. They will grow economically. They will build bigger houses or bigger barns, right? They will do better. Why? Because there are people, just like that lady I mentioned, there are people like me, like her, that are focused on making a difference and by helping one another.
I love how you mentioned we're going to focus on people, and the city might develop. There might be new buildings and new schools or some anything infrastructural, but it's the focus shall remain on people, on their well-being, and some of the examples that you mentioned of them achieving their American dream. So that's a wonderful word.
Absolutely.
Wonderful vision.
I like to remind people that when you build a building, you don't build a building because it's a pretty building. You build a building because buildings are made for people. Mm-hmm. And so if that building is a hospital, the hospital helps people. If the building is a home, it houses people, which is important. If a building is put up, it's for the purpose of people. And so our focus should always be on people, never on building.
Indeed. If someone would like to support your organization, how can they do that?
I would say the easiest way to support us is by going to our website and by clicking the donate button, right? I think one of the biggest challenges, and this is not a surprise for nonprofits, is limited resources. So if I can go back to that example about parents and the way we make decisions, right? As a dad, I have 4 daughters, right? So as a dad, I want to provide the best opportunities I can for my daughters. So I want to give them a Harvard education, right? The best education that's out there, but I'm limited by my fiscal reality. You know, I want to give my daughters a big home with a nice sized property and an amazing school district, but the resources I have are going to force me to make compromises on my vision. And so I would say equally for an organization, the quickest way to help is to provide resources. And so visit our website. It's www.ndtomorrow.org. And I can share that information with you maybe separately so that you get the acronym right. But what I would say is that that's the easiest way. But the other thing that I would say, for someone to support our organization is we're always looking for what I call do-gooders, people who do good work. And so if you want to give your money, that's great. But if you want to give your time and volunteer, either in helping with our youth programs or helping with, our health initiatives, particularly during this pandemic, or if you want to help with building strong neighborhoods, we can plug you in. We can place you in our network of friends that are committed to this city. And so I would say that those are 2 of the biggest ways that you can support. But if you think of other ways and you want to connect with me, I'm always open to a conversation.
The link to New Brunswick Tomorrow website will be provided in the link in the description, as well all the information about your organization for our listeners and viewers to take steps if they wish to support New Brunswick Tomorrow. Thank you so much, Jamie. It was wonderful to get to know about the great work that New Brunswick Tomorrow is doing, and we hope the best for the development of the people and the city of New Brunswick.
No, thank you. I truly appreciate talking about what I do, but to be able to jump on your platform and talk about it was an honor. So thank you so much for opening this up. And absolutely. Come visit us in New Brunswick and we'll show you a good time.
Awesome. For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube and the podcast algorithm that this conversation is important. And we need more communities in cities to come together to address the issues and care about the people and focus on the issues that matter the most to the residents and families. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.